Where in the world has Frank Hernandez been? This edition of the Pest Geek Podcast is brought to you by Pest Routes. Pest Routes, supercharge your company with Pest Routes, the #1 pest control software to help you dominate your goals. Visit them at pestroutes.com and get your free demo.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek Podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek Podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. I am Frank Hernandez, your Pest Geek, here discussing all things pest. We want to remind our audience to join in on the revolution. That's right, join in on the conversation, be part of the society. Pest Geek Podcast Listeners Group on Facebook. And we're on YouTube, we're on the web, pestgeekpodcast.com. Check out there the notes, everything that we put into the podcast. They're all on there. And now for today's topic. Hey folks, this is Frank, and I'm back. That's right, I'm back on the Pest Geek Podcast. And in case you've been wondering, a lot of people have been wondering where I've been. Well, I've been right here. I just haven't been there. And I don't know if any of you remember this show for kids. It was called Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? Where have I been? Well, I've been building my company, learning to recruit and hire people. And it's been a ride for the last 4 years since I started this new company. And I'll do a little recap for those of you who don't know who I am, because a lot of you don't listen way back. I mean, we've got over 220 episodes now of the Pest Geek Podcast. And a lot of you have no idea who I am or where I come from, but I've been silent for a year. The podcast has been going. Thank you to Jeff McGovern and Stephen Van Tassel and Adam Malanga for helping out and contributing what they have. They've done a phenomenal job, and they will continue to do this. And I really do appreciate all of the work they've put into this to make sure, and they've captured the vision of what I want to do, where I want to go with this. They have embraced the vision, have supported me, have consulted me, have given me great advice. They've been there for me. So I am surrounded by excellent people who actually have been doing this, all of them, probably longer than I have, and have in their own right, their own expertise. And that's why I appreciate that they're totally different from me. They're not me. They're totally different people with different backgrounds, different skill sets, different abilities. And I think that's what makes a very, very successful team, is not having people who are a copy of me, but experts in their own right. So I am so grateful for that. But yes, I took a year off from the doing an actual producing a podcast. I've been just behind the scenes doing the distribution and production work, but not doing the actual content creation for the podcast, because my business blew up and I could not handle it anymore, to the point where I had my wife for a year doing preventive service while I was managing the business, doing sales, marketing, and doing initials, and doing the lawn and garden work that is very extensive. And I went from working 6 hours a day in the field to 8 hours a day in the field to 10 hours a day in the field to 12 and 14 hours. I mean, I would be out, at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'd still be doing a restaurant at 12 o'clock midnight. That's how crazy it got. And I had to build a buffer in order for me to start hiring, because it requires a lot of preparation and knowing that the numbers are going to be there so that you can make payroll. And I took on everything else and put all the GHP preventive maintenance, which is a growing part of our business, and handed that over to her, and had her in the field for about 6 hours a day doing that, until I built enough business to start recruiting. The problem here I had was, listen guys, I didn't know how to recruit. And the way I had done it in the past in my previous part of this business, which, this is a brand new rebrand of my old company, where we were a landscape company, we were a pool service company, we were a property maintenance company. We did anything that the customer needed us to do on that property. And when, 3 years after I launched that company, the market was taken. I mean, I launched it in 2009, which I'll tell you what happened in 2009 some other time. But, you all know the economy crashed, and I lost a lot of my clients that I initially got. And 6 months later, I had lost about 40% of the business when that happened. And that was a huge blow. And then so we got into competitiveness with the people who were dropping our business. I mean, landscapers decided they were going to do pest control because their business was dropping. So they weren't recommending us anymore. And, in a period of 6 months, I lost $10,000 worth of business overnight. So we got into landscaping, and we started, you do when you're a solopreneur and you're threatened. And I want to talk about vision. And there's a verse in the Bible that I know, and it says basically, without a vision, the people perish. And I had a vision when I started my pest control business of what I wanted it to be 5 years down the line. And too many things happened in between, both in the business, in the economy, and personally, that I took a huge hit in that same year. And most people, if they didn't have a vision, they would have quit. And I'll give you an example. One of them was the economy took a dive. The year I started my company in January, well, by May, June, July, we were hurting. I mean, it was bad. It was really hard to bring in clients, especially when you're selling lawn and ornamental services, which is a luxury ticket item. We weren't selling GHP at the time. I was not into GHP. I was into lawn and ornamental purely. And these were high ticket clients. And when one of these clients dropped, you felt it. When you lose $120, $160 a month, $200 a month client, and you lose three of them at the same time, you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I got into reactionary mode. I lost my vision. And I went into what most people do is they start adding on services. And so I started adding on landscaping. I said, okay, fine. If they're going to take my lawn customers, I'm going to take their landscape customer. And customers were wanting a one-stop shop to do everything together, and it worked. And for about 2 to 3 years, that was on the up and up. The problem is, once the economy's better and then people start shopping around and then other people start lowering their prices to compete, it started dwindling. And we were doing pool service. And well, that's not something that you can retain because there's just too much competition in it. And when we started bundling everything for a client and they were spending $300 to $500 a month with me, now they were expecting a discount. Like if they were buying Comcast, and their internet and their phone, they're thinking, well, we should get a discount. We shouldn't be paying all this money. And now we started negotiating all this, and everybody got into that mindset. And people were coming in now and doing a lot of this stuff much cheaper. And this is where I was, 3 years into my business. In the same year that I started my company, the economy took a dive. My daughter was being born. I was buying my new house. And within 6 months after that, we were filing for divorce. And you talk about taking a hit personally with, all the investments you made, everything. If I wouldn't have had a vision to keep going where I wanted this business to go, which is where it is today, it just took me 9 years to get it there because of all the personal setbacks. I mean, it was horrible. And for those of you that are listening to me, this has happened more often than you think to a lot of people. And this is the power of having a vision. I mean, when back in 2009, I was already making plans of how I was going to grow through franchising. And I had to put it on hold after all this happened. My daughter was born the same year, lost a house, got a divorce, and, my business is going in the tank. So I went into reactionary mode, lost my vision, and said, oh, fine, I'll compete on anything I can. So I was selling cause one thing I know how to do is I know how to sell. And I've been selling since I was 16 and I'm 48 years old. So I know how to sell. I know I have to go after a market. I know how to be aggressive. I know how to cut throat. And I did that. I competed against everybody to take everything away and put it under one roof. The problem is then I couldn't find people that were quality to take care of these clients. And I was working with subcontractors on a lot of these things, pool service, and we just couldn't manage it. It was just out of my hands. And about 3 years of doing this and working 16 hours a day in the field, I pretty much got burned out. And then I started looking at the numbers, and the numbers weren't even there anymore. I mean, I'm taking you through a history so you can understand, because a lot of people haven't heard my story. And I went ahead and then just ran one day, and I said, I'm running racket. The numbers are going down in these areas. And the only thing that was profitable was pest control. I mean, pest control was carrying the company pretty much when all the other businesses were at 30% margin anymore. And I said, I made a hard decision in 2013. I said, I'm shutting down this company. This makes no sense. I'm getting out of all of this. I'm going to refocus on what I really wanted to do in the beginning. And it was about 50% of our business was, doing, maintenance work and doing landscaping, doing pool service. I'm going to shut it down. And that was a hard decision, because I had to realize that unless I shut it down I couldn't progressively do it, or else I'd never get out of it and never be able to refocus my vision. But at the same time, I was already dreaming about doing a podcast on pest control, because by nature, I'm a teacher and I'm an educator and I'm a trainer. And that's what I've done for, 30 years. So I said, I'm shutting all this down. And for a year, basically, I lived off of until I can build my pest control sales, which all this allowed me to focus on one thing and saying, let me get pest control clients. And that's it. And we're only selling 2 services, GHP and lawn and ornamental. And we can bundle those together and be competitive. And so I did that. And for a year, I lived off of all the equipment. I basically was selling everything off piece by piece. I had 4 trucks on the road. I had, several warehouses full of equipment, and I basically started selling it all off. And I was able to sell all my used equipment at the same price that I had bought it originally used 3 years later. And, that's what I did. I shut everything, and I did a rebrand. And I've been dreaming about doing an eco-friendly pest control business since the second year I was in the industry. So by 2006, I get into the industry. 2007, I thought I knew something. I realized I didn't know anything, and I started training myself. And by 2008, I was already talking to everybody about converting and doing organics, because I did so many lawn and garden, and there was a lot of organic products available. The problem is they weren't available to us, and the market wasn't even ready for that. Nobody wanted it. People would laugh me out of their home when I talked to them about it. So I realized the market wasn't right. And in 2013, there was about a 4% acceptance in the market to a 7% acceptance in the market of organics. Then we started growing very quickly. In about 2014, it skyrocketed to about 13%. And that was the time to really make that conversion. And so I started the conversion in 2014. And now here we are 4 years later, and we've got 2 technicians working for me right now. But I had to deal with if I go into groups, and I was in groups asking questions, and I would get a myriad of answers, primarily from people who have never even done it, but they thought this is how they would do it if they were to do it. So I started consulting the experts in the field of what it really takes to attract, hire, and train people. And I basically got, and everything works together for good. I mean, I'm one of those guys that just believe everything works together for good, and because of what I believe. And I said, when I started listening to them, I said, oh, okay, it's no different than what I learned from churches that were growing and churches that were failing. And what I learned is that the churches that were growing, and I had 20 years, about 24 years of experience in ministry, mostly youth ministry. And I said, okay, I get it. You basically have to create an evangelism program. You got to have a vision, create an evangelism program, and then create a process to create disciples. Simple process. I got it. And I apply it to my business. So I had to create a recruiting program. I had never recruited. The way I used to recruit, remember, was subcontractors, and I had one full-time guy working for me, and it just happened to work out. And when I decided to make this change, he says, I really don't want to go in that direction. I'm going to go do something else. And I lost him, and I had to go and run my own company again. So I had to learn, and I kept failing at trying to hire people because I kept using what everybody kept telling me to do who had never had really actually done it. So I created a 3-step process for recruiting. Now, mind you, I've been quiet for a year because for a whole entire year, for about 6 months, I was doing nothing but research and learning how to do this. And the only thing I could compare it to, if anybody's ever passed a kidney stone, okay, what I want you to do is you're passing broken glass. I mean, that's how painful this process was to learn and to implement and to do. And this is why so many people in the industry choose to stay single operators, because the process is painful. I had a meeting just a couple of months ago from a one of the listeners, and he's in New Jersey. He's coming down to Miami he came down for Expo, and he says, man, I want to meet with you. Let's have lunch. And I said, sure, bro, let's go have lunch. Well, it turned into a 4-hour lunch, and we were discussing all of the pain that he's been going through because he had ended up with back surgery, and then he had to hire, and it's been a nightmare. I've been dealing with guys that have been growing their business, talking to them about their process and pain and what they've been going through hiring, and the people that they have now. They have 2 and 3 and 4 techs, and the nightmare they've gone through. And I actually sat down and talked to people like that actually have been doing it and know what the pain is. And I ignored everybody else. I mean, I got out of every group. I haven't been active on any group for a year, haven't had the time. And this is where I've been and what I learned to do, and then put it into practice. And I learned that, I hear all the time people criticize the larger companies that they're always hiring. I just had the Comcast guy come to my mom's house, and the back of the van says we're hiring. The reality is that you have to take the same approach in ministry. And what I learned about people who had an effective growth program was a pastor who had a vision, who created an evangelism program for the entire body, the church, not an evangelism group, made everybody into evangelists, and then cast a vision of everybody is also a discipler. And what I learned is that a bad evangelism program and a bad discipleship program is better than none of all. An imperfect program is better than none of all. And what happens to a lot of people is they get caught in paralysis by analysis until it's absolutely perfect and I know how to do it. Guess what? You're not going to unless you go through it. You're not going to grow unless you go through the pain. I can't save you. I can save you some of the pain if you listen. But I can't save you if you decide you think you know better and you're not going to listen, because what I'm telling you makes no sense. And what happens is that I have a client who's actually a recruiter for a software development company. And I would sit there while I was servicing his home, how he was managing and talking and going to the process. And it's basically a never-ending process. If you're growing, it's going to be a never-ending process. You can't decide to recruit and hire only when you're needing, because you're always going to be needing. And here's why. So we created 3 things that we needed to do. I had been working, by the way, on my employee manual for 4 years. Why? Because, I'm going to get real personal with you here on this, because, I look at everything through scriptural lenses. I have a biblical worldview. I don't have a religious worldview. I don't have a denominational worldview. I have a biblical worldview. So everything that I look at through the lens of Scripture, because Scripture teaches me a lot of wisdom. And what I had to do was say, I had to create a process, and I had a vision. And because I believe faith without works is dead. If you're telling me that you believe something, but you're not working on it actively, you don't believe your own rhetoric. You're just talking. And a lot of people are talking, but they're not doing. You got a plan. So 4 years before, in 2009, I was already working on my employee manual because I wanted to grow a company fast and build it and have employees and not do all the work myself. It's just how it happens that I had to do it. So I began working on it. So progressively, I kept asking questions of what should be in a manual, and I built it to the point where I had a manual ready that I had to just touch up when the time came. What I didn't have was a process of how I was going to get that employee. That's what I didn't know, because every employee that I ever hired for all of the companies that I worked for, I had an HR department. I had a recruiting department. All I was given were 2 to 3 prospects to choose from with their profiles already done, with their app, with their background check. And I had to choose which one I wanted, and then they would do everything else for me. That was the extent of my hiring experience. I thought I knew how to hire because that's what I did. I realized I didn't know the first thing about HR, and I didn't know the first thing about recruiting. By the way, HR and recruiting are 2 different things. Think about recruiting as prospecting and HR as customer service and managing all that. You still need a sales. And what I learned about hiring and recruiting in the last year is that I got to take the same process that I have for getting clients and applying it to the hiring process. I need to actively be prospecting. I need to be selling, interviewing, and I need to be prepared to close the deal and hire, and take a process where I have an onboarding process and then an initial training process. And simplifying all that is what I spent 6 months learning how to do before I even practiced it. And that's what I did, because I've learned that you have to have a foundation to build upon. If you don't, you will have chaos. If you start hiring people with 3 different programs and 3 different commissions and 3 different hiring, pretty soon people are going to say, hey, this is not fair. I mean, he's making this, I'm making that. You got to have a system and everything. And if you listen to Good to Great, it's about getting the right people on the bus, not getting a warm body on the bus with a heartbeat. And where most people fall apart is they settle for the warm body versus the right person that they need. And since we are such a highly niche company, what we do is it requires a skill set. And what I did a year ago is I started figuring out what those skill sets were by talking to people who were actually in the business, testing myself, testing other people, and then creating a profile of what it would take to really do this job. And I started building that. So I've been building throughout the whole process. I have a vision, and I have my wall of all the ideas that we have and all the process that we're going through. And I have everything on sticky notes. I have about 100 sticky notes on my wall of things that we're working on that we can pull from and say, this is the right time to do this one. You always have to have ideas. You always have to have processes. And the 3 things that I hear 3 people complain about is I can't find anyone. The ones that are out there are no good. And then I hire them, and 6 months later, they're gone, if they last 6 months. If they do stay with me, they're with me for a year, and then they go either work for my competitor or they go start up. And the reason is you have no vision, you have no plan, you have no process. And when people see that you're not going anywhere, that you just wanted them to fill a position so that you wouldn't be frustrated anymore, but now that you're comfortable, you're not moving forward, and they looking at themselves saying, do I want to do this for the next 4 years while this guy makes up his mind on where he wants to go? And they move on quickly because this generation isn't going to sit around for you to make up your mind because they have bigger aspirations than you. When your people have bigger dreams and bigger aspirations than you do, you're in trouble. Your vision and your plans have to be so great that they can feel that they're never going to outgrow that and they're always going to be challenged. And that I already understood. So you got to have a vision. After you have a vision, you got to write the vision down and make it plain so that anyone who sees that vision can run with it. And if your vision isn't plain, it's complicated, it's convoluted, you're not going to go anywhere. And this is why. So the majority of people who are solopreneurs don't have experience in recruiting, don't have experience in onboarding, don't have experience in training individuals. They've never done this. And if they've only done one capacity of it. They're missing the other three components. So, what does it cost realistically? Let's talk about my process, the painful process of hiring. And the process of hiring, basically, it costs you about $4,000 to hire a person. Between running ads, the time you invest in interviewing. I mean, if you're making $125 an hour, which is the average pest control company in America, and you're making $125 an hour, and you got to stop 1 hour to interview a guy, you lost $125. If you interview just 10 people for that position, that's $1,500. So just 10 people that aren't qualified because you're wasting your time with people who aren't qualified. And because you don't understand that there's an attitude and an aptitude that you absolutely need to get this job done. Some people have this innate ability. The majority of us don't. I don't have it. I have to rely on a process and protocol and procedure to put people through that. So here's what I did. I said, okay, how do I prospect for this? Okay, let's say we're going to use Indeed. So I put out an ad on Indeed and I only get 20 applicants. 20 of them have never held a job for more than a year or two. They've been warehouse people. They've been people who, work at, a barista. They're security guards. And I get all kinds of people that want to do better in life, but they don't have the aptitude for what I need. I look at their resume and I said, I can't even talk to this guy. So what I did is I said, okay, I'm going to cast a wider net. I didn't post one job in one city because I was only getting one. I learned I needed to post in every city. So I posted in all 99 zip codes. Then I got a tsunami, about 100 people a day applying. How the heck do you manage 100 people a day applying? How do you look through 100 resumes? You go nuts. So I said, okay, this is not working. What do I need to do to streamline this? And I was talking to people and they're telling me, look, you need to have a way to sift through everybody and basically let them disqualify themselves. So you only deal with about 10% of that you have to manage. You can't manage the 100. So what I did was I automated the hiring process, the interviewing process, the initial interview. They go through about 3 interviews. I put people through 3 interviews. And the first initial interview, I do it online through video. By the way, if you're looking at this, there's a company called Easy Hire, which is what we use. You can look at that and you can create the questions. And what it allowed me to do was something miraculous. I learned how to create an ad. Because what the majority of people are doing are not creating ads, they're creating job descriptions that nobody's reading and nobody cares to read. And you have to create an ad that is appealing based upon what you have to offer and what the people are wanting, and you create a perfect match. And people are afraid of this, but if I don't create, the right one, then I won't get the right guy. And you got to think and reverse engineer the whole process. If you have a vision, if you have a good offer, you need to sell it. Stop putting out a 10-page job description that nobody's going to read. Sell the ad. Write a compelling ad that's going to make people want to apply. So what we did was, it's okay, we're going to do an elimination process. If people can't read, because this is another complaint that I got, from listening to people is as I'm getting these people who can't even read, who don't read the job description, applying for a job they can't do, don't know how to do, and never are going to do. So I said, let me eliminate 90% of these people right off the bat. So what I did is I created an ad, and in the ad is a very short headline, and right underneath the headline, there's a link that said, this is how you get an instant interview. And there's a link to the video. Well, guess what? If you applied for the job and you didn't just immediately go to that link and apply there, I automatically disqualify you because you can't even read. You're not even interested. You're just applying blindly to every job that's out there, hoping you can get a job. Well, if you can't read, how are you going to read a label? If you don't read and you don't pay attention to detail, how the heck are you going to do this job? Because here's what most people have and what I found out that most people think our job is. Based on what I talk to customers and based on talking to several hundred prospects of employee. And I now have enough data with several thousand to have enough data after a year to make certain calls. But you got to do the data. You got to have the hard data. Well, if I can mix, 7 different types of coffees and make 23 different drinks, I surely can mix a chemical in a sprayer and spray baseboards. I mean, how hard can this be? That's the mentality. How hard can this be? This is an easy job. I mean, the guy, because he lives in an apartment, he sees the manager come in every month with a B&G, spray the baseboards in the kitchen and in the bathrooms and leave with a guy, and that's all they did. And I still have roaches. How hard can this be? That's the mentality. They don't realize what we do, that, I have a mobile chemical factory that I'm going to entrust to you with 36 different products that you got to learn that label on. And it's much harder than mixing drinks. Hey, look, no disparaging. I mean, everybody has to start somewhere. And I would rather hire a kid who's 18 years old, who's actually had a job, than a kid who hasn't had a job. There is no job that is beneath anybody. I went from making $50,000 a year one time to down to making $7 an hour loading trucks. I've been up and I've been down. So I know what that's like. But I'm saying is that there requires a certain attitude and a certain aptitude. So the process allowed me to automatically weed out everybody who isn't going to follow protocol, policy, procedure, because I need people in my business to follow protocol, policy, procedure. If you can't follow protocol, policy, procedure, you automatically disqualified yourself. The second email I got was, hey, I applied for a job, and I would get tons of mail and people saying I applied and I haven't heard from you, and I wouldn't even respond. I mean, I don't have the time. So my whole idea is I need to find the right guy for this job. I don't need to go through 100 people who aren't the right people. I'm not going to do speed dating. I would get an email saying, the link doesn't work. Well, right there, you got disqualified. Because if you're in what year are we in now? 2019? In 2019, if you can't figure out how to copy and paste off of somewhere and paste it into a browser, I can't hire you because we're so technologically advanced. You got to use an iPad, an iPhone in the field. You got to learn to fill out forms. You need to learn to do all this. There's a lot of paperwork involved. If you can't figure out a simple task, you automatically disqualified yourself. And that's how I sifted through the first 3 months of posting. It took me 3 months to find the right guy. 3 months. 700 applicants, 7 of which applied to the video. So the actual application rate that I got was 10%. I needed to cast a wide enough net, always be closing, so always be prospecting. And now at a 10 that took on the video interviews on average is about 10%. So I got enough data with several thousand to get a good number. I know what I'm expecting now. I know the realization in the market we're in, because here's what people don't understand. You're in a 3% unemployment market. In most cases, 3.5%, 4%. Anybody who's worth anything is already working. How are you going to, you're going to basically have to poach them. They're going to have to want to quit where they're at and come over to where you're at. Is your offer going to be appealing enough to bring somebody over when they're already making $13, $14 an hour in an office? Why would they go out into the field and deal with roaches, deal with the heat, deal with all the customer service issues, work longer hours, not to make much more? It's not worth their time. And that's what you have to understand. This is what you're not understanding as a business owner, is that you're not making an offer appealing enough for anybody to come and work for you. You're going to have to up the ante. Well, the thing is, I'm not going to hire somebody and then they're going to make more than me. Well, guess what? You might have to take a pay cut. Why? Because you will, and if you focus on your business within 6 months, you will, or less than that, you will be back where you were, or even better, because now you're no longer doing the work. Somebody else is doing the work. You're doing the sales, you're doing the marketing, you're doing the administration. You're a manager now, and you transition. The problem is a lot of people want to go in this business and put CEO on their title and go from employee to CEO, technician to CEO, because it's in the title of a book. That's not the reality. You're going to have to be a manager somewhere in between, and you're going to manage for several years until you can hire a manager. And that's then their job. And then you can't take the BS from them saying, I can't get my people to do this. If a guy can't get his technicians to do something, he's a total failure. And I've learned that from being in management for 25 years. I was already an assistant manager by the time I was 19. I've been managing stores and restaurants and all kinds of business and territories for 20-something years. I know how to manage people. I know how to lead them too. But it's much harder when you have to do it for yourself because you don't have 15 departments behind you and unlimited funding. Like I said, it's like passing glass instead of passing kidney stones. So what I learned through the process is that 10% are going to apply. Those are the numbers. That's the reality, guys. And see, that's what most people don't want to hear. They want to hear, well, if I put an ad out in ZipRecruiter and in Monster and and you're going to spend $400 in ads a month, $200 to $400 a month in ads, that automatically you're just going to get it. The way they brand this stuff and they sell it to you, it's like it's miraculous. If you just get on our platform, you're going to have the right guy within 24 hours. Baloney. It's not going to happen. You still got to do the work. You still have to do the weeding, and you still have to go sift through all that data and interpret the data that you're getting back from them and how you're going to apply it and how does it apply to your company. So my suggestion is start working on the plan now, a year before you're actually going to need to hire somebody so you can learn to do this and invest the time in learning, because that's going to be the learning curve. To some people, it's going to be less. To some people, it's going to be more. Some people are more adapted to that skill than other people are. I mean, it's just, that's the way it is. And the average time it takes to hire across America right now is about 52 days. So you got about $4,000. I mean, by the time you put the ads together and you pay for ads, you pay for the software that you need to hire, the interview software, the sifting software. I mean, if you start calling around, guys, you're going to get sticker shock. You start calling around and says, I want an HR platform that is ready for me to go. It's $8,000 to $10,000 a year, period, for a real HR platform. You think you're paying, for the software you're using now to manage routes when you're crying about $99 a month? Wait until you get sticker shock, because I spent right now, as it is, between $5,000 and $7,000 a year on software to run my business. Between all the pieces of software we're using for marketing, for advertising, for social media, for recruiting, for hiring, for routing, for sales, for design, for everything that we're doing in-house. This idea that you're going to get a $99 software to pull off miracles for you, you're crazy. It's not going to happen. Some of you, who are going to grow a company are going to realize you're going to have to spend a lot of money to grow it. A growing company is a cash hog. It eats cash like it's going out of style. So, what happens is if you have no onboarding program and you have no initial training and you don't have a really good solid onboarding program, the average person leaves in 6 months. That's the reality. Why are people, I hire people, I found them, and then they turn around in 2-3 months and they quit because you didn't have an onboarding program before to determine whether they were even going to stick on board. So now I got a video interview and I asked 20 questions. Here's the advantage of that. I can sit for 10 minutes. If I'm getting 100 prospects a day and maybe I get 1 to 2 people who went through the process and actually figured out how to do this, clicked it, put it in there, because what I'm doing is by default is weeding out everybody else that isn't qualified for us by the process. The whole process is designed to weed out everybody. This is counterintuitive. But you got to give people an opportunity. There's good people out there that, if you gave them a chance, okay, you go do that and you go spend the money and you go tell me how that works for you. And after you almost put a gun to your head and shoot yourself because of this, you come and talk to me about it. And then I'll tell you the reality, and you'll know what the reality is. But if you have a good onboarding process and you got a good vision, the average guy is going to stick with you between 1 and 3 years. Oh my God, but I want somebody that's going to be with me long term. It's not going to happen. You need to get over it. I'm busting your bubble right now and letting you know it's not going to happen. The average life of a pest control technician by every standard is 1 to 3 years. Turnover is part of growing. It's part of running a business. This is why you always have to be recruiting. You're not going to keep everyone for 5 years. If you have 10 people, you might keep 1 or 2 of those for 5 years. No matter how good your salary is, no matter how good you treat people, no matter how your benefits are, no matter how raises you give them, if their vision for themselves is no longer in line with the vision you have for your company, they're going to go do something else. If you're not growing and a person has a desire to be in management, which everybody does eventually they think they're qualified to be in management, or they're looking at being a lead tech and you're not growing fast enough for them, they're going to move on to another company that will give them that opportunity. That's the reality. The problem is, this is not what you want to hear. You want me to sit here and do a podcast and tell you, if you follow my 3 steps, you're going to have success, and in 24 hours, you'll have a miraculous employee. And I'm going to blow sunshine up your butt all day long and sell you a ton of products you don't need, and it's not going to happen for you. This is where I've been for the last year. This is the pain I've gone through. I went through so much stress in the last year that I was gaining weight even if I wasn't eating because my cortisol levels were so high. That's the reality. But if you have a good onboarding process, they're going to stay with you longer. So the video software, which is Easy Hire, and I'm not promoting it because I'm using it. It's worked for me. I love it. They're not a sponsor. Okay, I'm not getting anything for the referral. If you tell them, hey, I heard you on the Pest Geek Pod, they're going to the Pest who? Yeah, because nobody listens to this podcast, by the way. But it's one of those things where it works. Because if they're willing to submit themselves to a process, they're the kind of people you want. See, you're creating an environment that goes along with your culture of your company and the vision you have for your company. And the kind of people that you want to attract and you want to bring over. So I watched the video. I can now see them. I can see what they look like. Did the guy show up in a nice, is he sitting down? Is he wearing nice clothes? I've had people do it with no shirt on, in bed. And I'm saying, do I really want to hire this guy? Think about that. You get to see people who they really are because they're in a relaxed environment. The questions I ask, I get to see their responses. I get to see if they can even read. You'd be surprised, people I give an interview and the question is right there in front of them. They can't read it. They can't read. I weed them out. It's a weeding process, and an automated weeding process. Then the guys who will say, man, this guy impressed me. I don't look at their resume. And here's why. I don't want to be influenced by the resume yet. I have a second process. So after they've taken the video interview, if I decide I'm going to hire them, I let them know. I send them an automated email, and it has a link for them to take a testing. And what this is a complete profile of that person. Mind you, I spend about $1,200 on the software. to do this. Okay? So now I hire, I want him to take the next step. I say, hey, we want you to take the next step in the process. This is all automated. I don't touch a darn thing. I don't talk to anybody. I don't waste my time. I don't have the time. I'm already putting in between 60 and 80 hours a week continuously, still doing this. I'm just doing different things, but I'm still putting in the hours. And I say, and then it gives them a link to go take this profile and fill out an online application. The application is pretty extensive. That profile, a battery of testing, tests them for reading. I want to know how good of a reader they are. I want to know if they can do math. If the guy can't do math and he can't figure out how many ounces per thousand he needs to calculate at how many gallons per thousand of water he needs to apply, how is he going to do this job? That's another weeding process. So it tests them on math, reading, mechanical aptitude. You got a guy who's never, ever done anything with his hands, and he's applying for this job because he's thinking, all I got to do is put a chemical in a can and spray it. How hard can this be? Duh. So mechanical aptitude, how is he going to fix that B&G in the field? How is he going to repair that broken hose? How is he going to figure out that the tank is clogged and the strainer needs to be cleaned? I mean, you teach all this anyway in your initial training, but can he do it? Is he good with his hands? Mechanical aptitude testing tells me that. Then the next thing, it puts them to 3 different psychological profiles, personality profiles, where it measures different things, because you can cheat on one. If you just give a person a disc exam, you're just going to get what personality group he's in. You can't just make a decision off of that. By the way, these are all diagnostic tools to get you to the end, to the best qualified candidate, so that then you can choose from 2 or 3. It isn't an end-all solution because it's not going to replace the personal interview. And we're going to get to that. What it's going to do is get me a complete and the best picture that I can, weed out the 99% that can, stick with the 1% that's worth it, because that's the reality of where you're going. So it tests them on what their attitude is to working in an environment. Their attitude about theft and their attitude about, and then it tests them on 29 different personality profiles of things that we're looking specifically for this job. And that's what I can't tell you, because that is our secret sauce. We already did enough testing, and I worked many years ago, actually, before I did this, with a company to help me develop the right personality profile for a person who is in a highly technical, like electricians, AC repairmen. They look at what profile, and what you find is the guy who can do air conditioning can do pest control. The guy who can do electrical work or work on systems or work on cables or work on internet, doing installation, can do pest control. So we figured out what this profile looked like, and I was able to have a picture. Then what I did was I tested it in groups. I bought the software and I said, hey guys, I'm giving you 10. And, I had 10 technicians do the test and then look at their profiles. And then I had a baseline. So I started already with a baseline of what I understood I needed. But after doing several of these, a dozen, you learn to get better at it. Initially, you're going to stumble a bit, but you get better at it. And everything is about learning and testing and going through the process. And now I get a complete picture. I've got an employment application that is very complete, because if they don't answer, it won't allow them to continue on the employee. It's not like you have a paper one where they can put, if they start putting not available on everything, I look at the data. Usually the data will coincide with what I saw in the video, and it will coincide on what I'm seeing on the application, and it'll coincide with, I'm getting a picture of this guy. You see, I'm building a picture. If they go through the process, the video, they do it on their own, they go through the profiling. The profiling says this guy will qualify. Some are higher, some are lower, but he's within the ranges of acceptable ranges of what we can work with. He scores really well on the top 40% of most things. Then and they filled out a complete application. Then I tell them, okay, guys, I'm here to the next step. The next step is coming in and spending about 2 to 4 hours with me in the field. Most of these guys are already employed. Means I got to work around their schedule. And what I do is I use that to my advantage. Because I say, okay, you get out at work at 4 or 5. Can you hang with me from 6 to 8 or tonight? Or on Saturday, let's say from 10 till 2 o'clock. If I start getting, well, I can't do anything late at night because I'm already committed, I can't use you. You already disqualified yourself. Why? Because we're in the 6th largest market in the country when it comes to population. 20% of the pest control is done in Florida. It takes the average client that we have 2 hours a day in commute, about an hour and a half to 2 hours of commute to go to work. They're not going to sit there at noon while we do pest control. We have to service them. Usually initials have to be done either before they go to work or they have to go after. Very few people, unless they have maids and nannies, then we can do it during the day. But we get a lot of people who work and they're not going to take the time off. We decided that we're in the service industry. We are not in the pest control industry. We're in the service industry. We're in the customer service business. So when people are used to getting services when they need them, then we have to be there for them. So we need people that are going to be able to work after hours, past 6 o'clock. Well, nobody works past 5 in our company. Well, that's your market. That's your business. But here, if we want to get the business, we have to do it. We have to do Saturday work because people are home on Saturday. It's the only day they have, and it's not an option. So we have to service and win it. So if you can't work Saturdays and you can't work evenings, you disqualify yourself. You can't even work for us. If you show up and then I show you what it is that you really have to do versus what you thought you have to do, then now you can decide and say, do you want to do this and get out of where you're at to do this? And you have to deal with those hard realities as an employer because, no, I'm not going to leave my $12, $13 an hour job to do this. This is way much harder than I thought. I'd rather know that now than 3 months in because I'm going to take you to a very difficult and nasty job so that you can see what you're going to have to do at its worst, not at its best. I'm not going to sell you a dream. I'm going to sell you a vision and where you can go if you do this. And then I sit down with them and I talk to them if they're qualified about the training they're going to have to go through, how they're going to have to study on their own every night, and how they're going to have to go through testing every night because my training program, and we were using a third party, and now I'm creating my own, which, by the way, I'm going to share with the Pest Geek Society. But it's going to be a 7-week training where you're going to do it at home on your own, and you're going to test on it. Because I need you to get the academic part. And then what I do with the academic part is I can have them practice it in the field immediately. It's all practical, linked together so that they can immediately put it into practice. But I need them to get the academic because if they don't, it's going to teach me that they're not going to be willing to learn. If you're not going to be able to sit there and read through a label and read through all of your labels and be responsible for reading your labels, I can't trust you that I'm going to put you in a truck when you don't know what that label is. Because I can put you in a class, but I can't spend, if I got 20 labels, and teach you 20 hours worth of labels. I need you to read those on your own. I have questions I'm going to ask you about those labels because there's about 20 things on the label I need you to know. I'm going to do a podcast on that soon. 20 things that are on the label that you need to know. And I need you to do. So I have an entire process from start to finish to ensure that they don't fail, that they have success. And then every raise that they get in their first 90 days is linked to what they're learning. So if you're doing your testing, you're passing your classes, you're learning, you're going to start getting milestones along the way. So they may start out at 13 an hour, and then they will end up about 15 or 16 an hour when they're done in 90 days. Whatever it is for you. I got some people here that are starting at $10 an hour, which is ridiculous. So that's been my process. What I've been through, what I've had to go through in the last year. This is why I've been quiet. This is why I haven't involved myself in anything. I haven't had the time because I've had to invest in all this. So then I can get to do the things that I really want to do. I got to do the hard things that I have to do in order to get to the point that I can do the things I want to do. So that I can have people working for me, working with me, versus me having to do all this. My goal is to work myself out of a job to where my company doesn't need me, to where I have managers and people working here where I don't have to do that work. My job then becomes to 3 simple things: continue with the vision, communicate the vision, sell the vision. I need to be a leader. But that's going to take years. That's not going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years. That's, the next 5 to 10. Because I have a long-term vision. I have a long-term plan. Things are going to happen along the way. I'm going to fail. I'm going to stumble. I'm going to fall. But if I get back up and I start getting back to what our original vision is, and not see the problem with a lot of business owners is they change their mind like the way they change their underwear daily. The people don't know what to expect. Every day you're changing something. Every day you're doing something new. You need to keep it consistent. Have a vision. Without a vision, the people perish. And write the vision, make it plain so that everybody can run with it. Folks, I hope this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast has helped you. If it has, do me a favor. Hey, guys, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Go ahead and share it. Go ahead and share it on groups. We're producing a lot of things, and I'm keeping to my promise of what I started in the beginning. We are going to be the world's #1 pest control training podcast. That has been the vision, to train people who are otherwise nobody is training. And this is where we're going after, and this is why we stuck to what we've stuck to for so long. And I hope you can appreciate this. I've missed you guys. I've missed being on the microphone. I miss doing what I do because this stuff is the stuff that energizes me as a person. It isn't how big my business is getting. It's always been in my life of service, in my life of ministry, is to see other people grow. And this is my calling in life. Whether I do it from a biblical or whether I do it from a business. This is why I train so many of my competitors locally. Because this is my calling in life. When I combine what I've learned in business, what I've learned in this business, what I've learned in helping people grow, I found something that challenges me on a daily basis and makes me grow. And I haven't arrived. All I'm doing with you guys is documenting my journey and going along the way. Because I don't have all the answers. I'm getting into bigger groups now with bigger people that are more successful than me. I never want to sit down talk to somebody who hasn't done it. I want to help the guy up who hasn't done it to get to a level where I am. And then he might need somebody else later to help him get to the next level. But if you are not outgrowing your people and your people are outgrowing you, you're going to be in a very, very difficult situation as far as your business goes. So I hope it has been helpful, and I will see you next time. We hope you have enjoyed this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. Until next time, have a pestacular day.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.